Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. J Rod Plays here, and I hope that I get you guys chilling and enjoying a food coma after having some good food with family or friends or even on your own, and just kind of taking it easy for the day. Hopefully, you guys aren't having to work, but if you are watching this at work, thanks very much for putting yourself aside, putting your own needs aside, so that other people can enjoy the day with their families. I wanted to make this video once everything was kind of settled when it comes to a lot of the drama with the firings, or should I say the layoffs, and any seasonal drama that had gone on. It's pretty much already done and settled, and I can kind of get a good idea of what needs to be done to make the game better, which is the whole premise of this video. And, I'd appreciate as well any feedback in the comments on some of the ideas, or if you have some additional ideas that you'd like to have added. Hopefully, again, somebody at Bungie is doing the job of going out and checking out these smaller channels and getting this positive feedback so that we can actually get the game back on track, or at least on a track in which it can survive after the final shape, because most people are gearing up for this final shape, and once it's already done, and once the witness is gone and we've had that mission that everybody's promised, you know, everybody's like, okay, well, that's it. I'm going to skip the episodes. But I don't plan to. I plan personally to keep playing through the episodes because I've invested all this time in the game. I've invested all this effort into the game. I've spent this 10 years. I've got my character a certain way. So as long as they don't like wipe out my progress, I'm going to continue playing through these episodes to enjoy the story. And with some of the leaks that have come out, which again, I'm not going to get into in this video, it seems like they're going to be decent. They're maybe not necessarily going to be like groundbreaking amazing, nothing obviously Forsaken level like everybody keeps comparing things to, but at least it's going to be something that you can play, knock out the campaign, play a couple of the expansion items like raids or dungeons, things like that that go along with them, and then just move into a different game, because a lot of people have that hard time transitioning into a different game and then coming back to Destiny and then transitioning to a different game. And me, I have a bunch of games that I play in the background that have gone unfinished because I play them around Destiny essentially. Destiny is my main game, and then when it's slow in Destiny, like it has been the last few weeks, I go and play other games like Hunt Showdown, playing Baldur's Gate, things like that. And that's how I keep from getting super burnt out on the game. I have been putting in some prep work over the last few weeks because I'm a content creator. I've been trying to get to the point where I have all of the builds and everything kind of unlocked within the first few days of the next season. That way I can bring you guys build videos and things like, hey, I've done this, I've tried this, and this is how I want it to come across. And hopefully that additional work that I've put in, that additional bounty prepping and stuff like that, will make it to where I can get these to you guys in a timely manner, with everything else going on right outside of content creation. So let's go ahead and get into the main topic, which is feedback on how to fix the game, because the game needs help. It's in a bad spot. Everybody's been making videos about this, from Mastercross, which he usually always does, to even people like True Vanguard, who I usually tend to disagree with because he's always trying to make hot takes counter to the main kind of consensus in the community about things. He's always trying to be different, but it comes, I don't know, it falls flat to me. Me and TV had different opinions on most things when it comes to PvP in the game and all those kind of things. But I still have watched his videos off and on for a long time because he's been a long time member of the community, and he hasn't been one to make a bunch of fluff content like MTash, for example, used to do, where he would make a video about every single weapon and say, oh, this is the weapon you have to get, and then you go and you put in all your time and you chase that weapon, and then you get that weapon, you're like, I already have something better than this. Like, I spent all my time doing this because he hyped it up, and so I get it, he was just trying to make a living, and I guess he transitioned over to Genshin to do that particular thing. But I got tired of content creators kind of doing that to people, making those dead end videos about stuff, and then you get hyped up and you get those things. And I try not to want to hopefully ever get into a situation where I have to make that kind of video that's going to waste my viewers' time, and it's going to put them in a position where they're going to spend time out of their day and they're going to spend hours to get something to only be disappointed by it. Normally, I only put out stuff like guides or things that you can get them right away, or this is how you get it, and as long as you follow my steps, you'll get it, and this is what you want, not this roundabout stuff. So when you have people who don't typically make videos, doom and gloom videos, or videos like I said, like TV's was an example, that weird biblical video that he put out, which was entertaining but still kind of weird. You know it's a problem. You know that something has to change, and If they want to really be serious and Bungie really wants to be serious about getting it right, these changes probably have to happen in order to make sure the game is going to have a longevity past the final shape, even for the final shape to come out. Because again, if the final shape doesn't land and it's not a good expansion when it comes to being like a 10 out of 10, like it needs to be an 11 out of 10 to be fair. But even if it's not like a 10 out of 10, if it's like an 8 out of 10, that's probably a failure. And so they're in a tough spot, kind of in a no-win situation. They have to deliver and over-deliver, and they can't ever shake that whole "don't over-deliver" situation that they got when they were at the conference. It was like GCX or something like that was the name of the conference, where they started to talk about how it's more important to be fast than it is to have quality, and to put out content, and then you can fix it later. And so you don't want to over-deliver because it creates this idea that this is what content should be like, and then it makes it hard for you to follow up those content. And that's exactly what they did. And by talking about it like they did so candidly, they've kind of spiked themselves for every future content piece because it's always tainted by don't over deliver. Just like we don't want trials to come out half baked. Don't over deliver. That is the PvE version of what the trials PvP version of was. We don't want trials to come out half baked, and then of course it came out worse than half baked. So the first thing that they're going to need to do is they're going to need to completely retool their entire leadership. They're going to have to make sure that the CEOs in each department are replaced entirely, or anybody who had their fingerprints on the poor decisions that have been made over the last 10 years that are still there, they need to go. Management needs to be able to adopt ideas from the larger player base, like the feedback that's given and done quickly. And if there's anybody left that has said, no, we're not going to do this thing that the players want and the players want in droves, or we're not even going to try this thing because we can make more money this way, that person has to go because it's small minded. By making those things, by making those changes, by having that feedback that players have been given, and I'll go over some examples, they could have made more money than what they currently made. They would have saved money off the money that they've spent. They wouldn't have even been in a situation where they've squandered billions, and they would have been able to pretty much adapt based on the player feedback to the larger issues that have really hampered Destiny 2 as a whole when it comes to trying to get new players in, trying to keep those players, to retain those players, and then trying to get those players through word of mouth to get their friends into the game. Because right now, it is such a hard game to recommend to anybody. And I'm not the first person to make that particular criticism. It's just one of those things. There's like video after video after video of people joking about how terrible it is when you have to buy these expansions and you have to buy another expansion. And then you thought that you got all the right expansions, but you bought the wrong thing, and now you need the dungeon pass. Now you need the season pass. And so I get a lot of comments from people on these videos. Hey, how do I do this thing with Guardian ranks? And it's like, sorry, you need the season pass. And it's like, what? Like I can't even do this free thing that's supposed to be like this kind of side thing that's not even necessary without actually having to pay more money into the game than I've already paid. And so I can understand that. I mean, like I understand both sides. Like, yeah, you should probably have to have the season pass to get to rank 11, but to get to like rank 8, maybe not. So again, it's one of those things where player feedback gets to the team, and the team would try to relay that to the management, and the management would be like, no, this is what you want to focus on, and that was the wrong thing. I mean, it's absolutely uncontroversial now at this point to look at the leadership and say you've made the wrong decisions. There's no covering up. There's no it's they have absolutely made the wrong decisions. They made them in poor timing. They've done them in the worst way possible. The optics on these things are terrible. The actual real world consequences of their decisions are terrible. And so there's no denying that the leadership is inadequate in some way, whether they don't have the skills, they don't have the soft skills, they don't have the foresight, they don't have the ability to sit and analyze the data that's in front of them and make appropriate decisions. Whatever that may be, the leadership is lacking in a lot of different ways. And that includes like nice guys like Joe Blackburn, for example, who I think has probably done a fine job. The fact that they barely have a strike team right now, the fact that the PvP strike team just came about because we were at like a critical precipice to where the game was just about to be like, you know, to the point where it was like weeks away maybe from being irrelevant. And he said, okay, I have to come out and I have to make sure that people know PvP wise, like there's still a bit of light at the end of that tunnel. There's still another carrot to chase, maybe. Again, it took to get to that point, and that's the big problem is you need to head that off months before you get there. You need to say these are the things that are coming up with because these are the immediate characteristics that we see that people are displaying, and these are the complaints that they have, and we're going to implement these things now instead of waiting later until we actually have to. And so because they do that, then all of a sudden people are like, yay, but sarcastically. It's like, yes, we get this thing, but it took you kind of a long time to get there. And we had to really, really bitch and complain and basically threaten to leave the game in order to get us this thing that we're talking about. So that's one thing that I would say that is, again, uncontroversial in trying to say the CEOs need to go because they have done terribly, and anybody else in any other job role that has done as terribly as these CEOs have should have been fired. If it wasn't for the fact that Bungie has like this kind of like very touchy feely kind of person first, people first, human first type of culture that they were trying to portray, that they've betrayed with their recent firings and layoffs, you know, that culture is probably the thing that saved these CEOs' jobs so far. But if the CEOs can survive this kind of ridiculous and over the top and very poorly implemented company resizing and restructuring, then they should also have to feel the weight and the brunt of that. Whether that be like they're working for free, like, you've been paid enough money up to this point, you're going to work for free until we get this going so that we can afford to hire new people back again, but for different roles. Obviously, we don't need them in the communication side because you don't talk to us anyways, right? But we can have these people on teams and we can hire on other studios like we used to when they had, like, for example, the Iron Forges and stuff like that. The additional puzzles and stuff that were from additional studios that were a little bit complicated, but they were still something fun to do. And yeah, it was controversial whenever we were opening the forges, how ridiculous the puzzle was. Like, who decides that you want to type plus butterfly with the wrong weapon, blindfolded by somebody else calling out the positions, and you having to memorize them? Like, that was wild. But and if you guys don't know what I am referring to, you should check out opening up the Bergusian Forge. I think it was the name of the forge, and how ridiculous that whole process was, and shooting random trees, and then people turning off their streams and trying to cut the audio to their streams because they were trying to be world's first, and it's just just a lot of distasteful things happened around that. But at the same time, people still enjoyed it and had a great time, and I still to this day remember the exhilaration when I was actually able to open that forge, and I was one of the few people to open that forge and get that emblem, and it's still a rare emblem today because it was such a tough thing to do because you had to survive so much adversity just to get to the point where you could put in that code. And even then, the code was buggy. We put it in right, and we had to put it in again a second time before the time ran out just to get it to accept it. So crazy how some of those things turned out. But going back to the CEO side of things, they make these decisions based on revenue, for example, and they try to argue that the revenue is what drives their decision making. But I can guarantee pretty much that the revenue would have been higher if more new players could join the game and they could start even with the veteran players that are currently at the game. And greed is preventing that from happening. The fact that they want these old expansions to sell because they're still selling doesn't mean that it's okay to create this huge chasm that players have to try to somehow get over when they're trying to get into the game for the first time. If you just made it to where, like, you say, like, we're going to cut off at Shadowkeep, for example, or we're going to cut off at Beyond Light, and anybody that buys the base version of the game is going to get Beyond Light and back. They're going to get everything. They're going to get the raids, the dungeons, all of that for this one price that is maybe slightly higher than a normal expansion. But at least they can buy this legacy pack and they can get caught up and they can start with some weapons or some quests to get weapons that are hard to get normally and just kind of put them on a somewhat even footing to some of the veterans. And yeah, there will be people that cry about it, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing that somebody's going to cry about the fact that somebody starts out more equal to them after them having to put in the work, because the people that already had those items and that gear and all that, they've already like spent time using them. They've already had the luxury of learning how to operate those things and how to build the builds. And these new players, they're not going to come in knowing all of that. So they're really not on even footing at the veteran players. The veteran player still has that experience, regardless of if the gear or not is magically given to somebody at a certain point, and you're pissed because you had to earn it sometime 8 months ago. It's like, come on, like, get over it. For the health of the game, we need more players playing the game, and if that means that putting them on even footing with us up to a certain point, up to a certain cutoff, helps them get to that point, then so be it. Then that's great. And that's good for the community. It's not a bad thing for the community for them to come in and have all this stuff that we got to enjoy for all of this time. You know what I mean? It's like getting a used car that's a nice used car, and then having somebody complain that had that same car and drove 100,000 miles on it because you got it at 100,000 miles. Like, yes, it's the same car, but they got it at 100,000 miles. Somebody else got 100,000 miles in that car, which is you, and enjoyment and use of that, and they're just barely getting it at 100,000 miles. You know what I mean? And they pay more for it, for that matter, right? In that one instance. So it's crazy that some people would maybe think that that's a bad thing, but I think that starting new players off with a little bit of a leg up to help them get more even with these veterans, to help kind of consolidate all that into one pack. I can guarantee you that that would be given as a gift on Steam more often. Players would be able to jump into Destiny and say, "Hey, I love this game on the free to play version, free to try version, right? Let me buy this one pack that's going to get us caught up." And that's going to be the situation that a lot of players are going to find themselves in. And I'm just going to dump this one amount in, and boom, I'm caught up, and I can do all of these things. And then once I'm done with all these things, then maybe I'll get into the season. And then they're caught up at that point because now they can just buy the new seasons and they can just keep going from there. So the fact that they're still selling these old packs means that players, there are still people that are willing to go into those links to buy those old packs just to catch up and spend that money. Think about how many more people would be willing to buy the game if they knew that they could catch up to the veteran players up to a certain point and get everything back, and it's nice and clean. Like, you only have four things on the store instead of 40, right? Like, you have your legacy pack, you got your new dungeon key, you got your new season pass, and then you've got your new expansion. And those are the four things that you have on the store, plus whatever DLCs, for little dances and stuff like that you have. That's fine. But that's so much cleaner and so much easier of an experience and so much easier to explain than what we have right now, this fragmented system that players can buy things, go set off into the world, and then hit a wall and realize, should I have to spend more money? Because maybe they don't have that money, and then they just fucking put the game down because it's like, all right, I don't want to play this anymore now because I got screwed. I'm going to refund this and I'm done. And now they're gone. So that's the most frustrating thing, is that because of greed, that situation exists. And that's the only reason, is just because of greed. And that greed, that same greed, didn't even get you anywhere because you had to lay people off because you failed. So you are, not only were you greedy as a CEO, but you were greedy and a failure. It's one thing to be greedy if it works, right? Like Activision and things like that, where they've had these crazy loot boxes and these crazy situations where these $1 reticles and stuff like that that actually get people to buy them, and the game is fine. That's one thing. But this game is not fine. This game is on life support. So you need to find a way to consolidate things. You need to find a way to bring new players in, and you need to keep people. And the fact that you're still being greedy as a CEO, as a leader of a company, leader of people, shows that that is your flaw. Your flaw is greed, and your flaw is failure to see the forest through the trees. Because you can literally be pointed and you can be taken as a horse to water, but they can't force you to drink. Essentially, that's the saying. You can show the CEO, this is the pain point. This is what's going to happen if you fix it, and they don't, because they're like, well, what we have right now is fine. Again, going back to the car analogy, it's like you have repairs that need to be made. And the repairs, if you would make the repairs, can make your car last another 10 years. But, it's working the way that it is, and you've got other expenses, and so we're not going to repair this car. We're just going to drive it until the engine falls out. You know what I mean? And that engine's going to fall out a lot sooner than you think because you didn't make that repair. And so it's essentially what they're dealing with Destiny. There's things they could have fixed, and there's feedback that could have been taken, and they didn't take it, and now this is where we are today. And so, you know, one thing that they always get me with is whenever they, for example, will fix something that is beneficial for a player, like some type of a bug that messes with the economy a little bit, that gives the player a leg up, or some type of an ability. Like recently, for example, in the most recent TWAB, they made it to where you can't slide, use your shotgun, and then use your melee, so that you can't do some of the combos that you could do that were fun, that were actually enjoyable, that made the game feel fast paced, and that made the game feel dynamic. But now it's going to be a lot harder, and you can't just sit there and slide and do your damage and then hit your boss with your ability, with your 1-2 punch shotgun, and then go into your banner of war like the Titans have been doing, and just having a blast doing something different, right? Just using your abilities, which is what the game is centered around. Obviously, they want it to be around gunplay, but that ship has sailed a long time ago. This has been an abilities game for quite a long time, and that's the way that it's set up. Whenever you set up the abilities the way that you have, that ship had sailed at that point, because gunplay is no longer a thing once you have supers and grenades and class abilities, especially abusable class abilities. You can't fix that. There's no fixing that without changing it. At that point, we're Destiny 3. We're not even Destiny 2, right? So the fact that they're going to go out of their way in order to fix something quickly that it affects the game negatively and them negatively, but then they will not do the same thing when it's something that affects the players negatively, when they have these game breaking, like essentially player cheating things that happen that take time from people, that literally take time from people. They won't fix those things. But when it gives time to somebody, when it saves somebody time, when it saves somebody resources, oh, that's going to get fixed right away, quickly. And so it shows you that they have the agility to do these things. They can do these things. And again, there's no controversy in saying that, because we've seen it happen, that they have the ability and the agility as a team to fix things within hours, but they choose not to, because they prioritize things so poorly. And that, again, goes to management, because management will literally stop a coder and a developer from going in and fixing something, because they're like, I need you over here instead. You know what I mean? It's like you think that as a employee, you're going to get in there and you're going to make a difference, and then you get hired on, and then you go and you're like, "Hey, I fixed it. I fixed this one thing. I just need the time to get it implemented into the main system, and then we need to restart everything and have it out for the next patch." And they're like, "No, don't do that. Do this instead, because that's something that can be put on the back burner. We need you over here." And it's mainly something that can have already been done, and they can go and they can do that. And I guarantee you that's happened to somebody. If these people were allowed to talk and speak more candidly than they already have, if we could interview every single one of them and there weren't issues with NDAs and things like that, I guarantee you we could hear stories of people who had a fix, had a solution, had it ready to go, and they were told no, because it was either over delivering, like we talked about, it was something that they were not necessarily seeing as valuable at the time, it wasn't a priority to leadership. And so again, anybody that's got their fingerprints on any of that, they need to go. Period. They can find things else to do. There's plenty of other companies that need people that are like that to ruin them as well. Bungie is no longer one of those companies. They need somebody else to go. Like, actually, even thinking about it, there's companies that have CEOs that are worse than the current CEOs at Bungie. They could have a slightly less worse CEO and be fine with it. But Bungie is not one of those companies. Bungie is basically on life support, and they need somebody in there quickly to perform CPR, so that way we can get this company back off the ground. We can make sure that they are successful for their other projects, because they've already spent that money. They've already diverted resources that they shouldn't have over to these other projects before making sure this product was good. They've already worked on and cemented other products before this product was cemented perfectly. And they do it because that was their belief. Again, just that was their motivating factor, was to be quick and to make sure that the content was out, not to do it quality, but to do it quantity, essentially. So now let's get into specifics. And one of the things that I think is that the teams that are left, they need to be able to complete system-wide changes that need to happen soon into the game to bring more players in and to keep the current ones. So one thing, for example, that we need to work with or work towards is to get infinite vault space. So that way you can just basically pull whatever role you want from the vault whenever you want, from orbit, from in the middle of an adventure, and have it be fluid. My idea would be to make it to where you can go into your collections and you can go into your gun and open your gun up, select the perks you want, hit a button, boom, it generates that gun for you at whatever light level you're at, and you can just run around and do that. That way you can just delete stuff from your inventory. You don't have to worry about having super high-end vault space with that scenario, because you can always just generate a new gun, and as long as you've unlocked those perk combinations, you can just re-unlock them again, and then maybe have like a small glimmer cost. And now that we're going to consolidate to glimmer, that's perfectly fine. So if that way I can like delete all my stuff that I'm not necessarily using right now, and if down the road some change happens, some sandbox change, where a gun that I've unlocked in the past is going to be like, meta. I can go in there, I can buy the gun back for a little bit of glimmer with the exact perks that I need it on, and then that respects my player time. That means that I've already unlocked that. Like I've kind of caught them all, like a Pokemon, for example, and now I can go in there and I can reopen that. And you still get random rolls, and those random roll configurations are going to unlock configurations in the system that it tracks. And to me, I think that would be a lot easier than having like this large amount of vault space to keep like a static amount of weapons. I think it's much better if you could just generate those weapons. Same thing with the crafted weapons. If you could just generate your craft the way that you had it, and then maybe just spend some glimmer to get it to the level that it was at before you deleted it if you decide to delete it. Things like that. I think we could keep the same vault space that we have if they make it to where you can pull out any gun from your collections the way that you've unlocked it in the past before. I think that would solve a lot of issues. Same thing with crafting. I need to simplify the crafting even more. I think if you could lower the amount and the cost of the crafting from the core perspective and things like that a little bit to make it to where you could also just kind of delete and recraft, that would make sure that there's more variety. Players would try different combinations a little bit more. If it wasn't so punishing to craft an item, delete it, and then lose all those cores, for example, which is kind of the new pain point. It's going to be the new choke point for a lot of people is enhancement cores if you didn't do any of the exploits. And until they get rid of those, which it's crazy, right? They're going to get rid of shards, even though cores have been exploited multiple times. They're going to get rid of shards because apparently shards are the problem and not the cores, right? Even though cores have been exploited. Just ridiculous, just ass backwards when they do stuff like that. Better currency handling and respect for player time investment is another issue, and that I just touched on is they can't and they shouldn't remove these currencies that players sit and grind for without having an exchange for them. They should be still turned into glimmer. Like the legendary core situation, if they made it to where, yeah, okay, we're not going to get any new legendary shards, but any old legendary shards can always be converted through Rahul or some other vendor to glimmer, and it wouldn't have been a big problem. It would have been like, whatever, fine. I have this large stack. I can turn this into glimmer whenever I need this glimmer. I'm not even going to worry about it. But because they're not going to give anybody back their time, essentially, that they spent grinding for these things, playing the game, that's what's so disrespectful to me. And that's, again, a management decision that got fingerprints all over it of whoever made the other shitty decisions to do this exact same thing, to try to bring things in line and to basically punish the people that they see that quote unquote exploited the game, even though they are actually exploiting the player and disrespecting the player time that was put into those things. So I've got a whole video on that if you want to go and look into my legendary shard video. But that's essentially a good example of how they think and how their mindset needs to change going forward. They need to be more player friendly and more player centric and less worried about their own specific economy, because in the end it doesn't matter. The Destiny is not a game where you have like an auction house or where you can trade things. So it's only going to affect one player. Like me having a billion shards and you having two shards, that's not going to change ever any kind of interaction. You're still going to have your struggle with your two shards if you're somebody with two shards, and I'm still never going to have a problem because I'm going to have my billion shards. You know what I mean? So what does it matter if I keep the shards and allow the currency to be changed? I'm still going to be earning glimmer and using glimmer. The caps again are a problem, and so until you just uncap glimmer and then consolidate everything down and maybe just glimmer and a couple of small things, you're not going to fix that. So why even uh, go and do something that's going to hurt players like this, hurt their sentiment toward the game, make them less likely to play the game for longer periods of time? It's just a bad move, bad calls all around. Speaking of bad calls, ornaments. Ornaments having the really cool stuff be only Eververse only and not being able to earn those things through playing the game is a super poor decision as well. Yes, I get it that they feel like they'll make more money that way by like having, for example, this new Witcher set show up and be something that you have to spend $20 per to get it, and people will spend the $60 to get it. But at the same time, people can also grind the game, and then you get a lot of player time and player engagement to get the 6,000 bright dust so they can buy it per. Or if you want to make it 10,000 bright dust, fine, you can buy it per. But there should be always, 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 every single ornament should be able to be purchased by bright dust. Every single item in the Eververse store should be able to be purchased via bright dust. And we should get more bright dust from our engrams, the Eververse engrams, and they should also have more ways to generate bright dust so that more players play the game. Especially like, for example, raiding. Like if you were to give players who beat master raids bright dust, oh man, they would be in there. They would be grinding these master raids to try to get these things because that's an incentive. That's something nice to give a player that beats the hardest content in the game. You know, like if you do solo flawless, for example, on some dungeon, you should get bright dust. Like, could you imagine if you got, let's say, 3,000 bright dust for solo flawless? If somebody can get in there and boom, 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 grind up some bright dust like that would be really cool. And if you were to, again, have that same scenario, you could have streamers who right now have this kind of carry culture carry people to bright dust. By doing these master completions and help them get some bright dust so they can get an ornament. And so just little small changes like that, little small tweaks to a system that you already have can make such a huge difference and have so many avenues and so many pathways to improve the game and improve the community, but you just don't do it because either nobody thinks about it, or if they have thought about it and they've been told about it, the greed at the top has said, no, we're not going to allow this to happen because X, Y, and Z, and our dollars need to be this and this and this. And it shouldn't be about dollars first. It should be about players first, dollars maybe second or third. And yes, the company has to make a profit. I get it, but there is no company without the player, so you have to be player centric. Period. There is no controversy in that. Being player centric first, fixing the things that affect the players first, fix everything else second. If they would have done that, Bungie would be in such a different spot. They'd have so much more support. It would have been so much harder for people to pile on them because they've had goodwill build up, and now they've squandered all that goodwill. And so now they're going to have to earn that goodwill for the first time in a long time. It's been that way. Like, I mean, I felt in many other times in my career as a Destiny player that they have had to earn back goodwill. But this, to me, for whatever reason, feels just that much heavier because of all the things that have just had like a confluence all at the same time, having real world issues, real world harm that they've done converge with the digital harm that they've done, and the kind of that very bad optics that has been plaguing Bungie for a long time and for really the last couple of years more increasingly, for all of that to kind of converge into one just terrible moment in time. Bungie's really in trouble. And again, I'm obviously not the first person to say this. I'm not a doom and gloom person. I've even again started the video by saying that I'm going to keep playing the game regardless of the situation. But it's just something that you have to really consider as a player. It's almost embarrassing that you play Destiny 2 at some points when you try to tell people what's your main game because of all these situations that Bungie finds themselves in. And that's a bad place to be as a studio, to have people embarrassed to say that I play that game because of X, Y, and Z. So again, better care for the player. It just is a common theme in all of these things, and these are ways that you can better care for the player. On that note, speaking of caring for the player, UI. So they've tried many times to try to get these systems in place, but they still have yet to really come up with something that has made like a kind of a visual impact and say, hey, now we've got a situation where we have a fully customizable UI, like World of Warcraft, for example, and so many other games that you can download these mods for to change how it looks. Now, I know that there's that idea between PC to PlayStation 5 to Xbox and so on and so forth, but I'm pretty sure that they can make a customizable UI that's specifically like Bungie only, and then maybe if they want to open up some additional fully other custom UIs on the PC side for people, I don't see them doing that, but I guarantee you they have the ability and they can set up custom icons and custom specific UI components that you can then resize. You can move around the screen. You can put in different parts of your screen. You can have them in the center. You can have them on the sides. So that way, whenever you're playing the game, you have everything that you need on your HUD where you can see it, where you need it, all the buffs, put them in a certain spot, put specific important ones to your build right next to it. And if you could even tie them to your build in the build switching tool that they have in there currently, oh my God, that would be chef's kiss to be able to switch between builds and have specific buffs that are specific to your build tied into your UI, and your UI changes based on whatever build you're in, so you know exactly which build you're in. There's no confusion what subclass and build you're in. That would just be amazing. Like that would be like some of the best UI and best handling of in-game mechanics that I would have ever seen in any game, including World of Warcraft, which has like a fully customizable UI that can do that. The fact that you could do that, but then switching builds, because in WoW you would switch classes, you would completely exit the game and come back into your other class, and your other class could then have a specific UI for that class. So that's the same thing. But to do it on the fly in game, if that's possible, if that's something that's technically possible, man, that would be magnificent. So that's one thing that I think that they should work on. Uh, Again, we talked about how they've started to be able to make things where you can like pull stuff from the vault and orbit and stuff like that. But if you could do some additional things like with trackers for debuffs and buffs with your abilities, oh man, that would be fantastic. And of course, to do that, that goes back to some of the culture thing that I was talking about earlier, how they have this kind of touchy-feely, like person first culture. And when it comes to certain things, oh, they're a company and they've got to make their money. But when it comes to working, and when it comes to working 7 days a week, and if it comes to working 24 hours a day, no, that's too far. No, no, we can't hire people for third shifts. How dare we pay people overtime, and how dare we pay people a stipend to work in the second and third shift of the day? And how dare we open 7 days a week to where our lights never shut off because we're a $1 billion company? Oh no. You know what I mean? Like they have the resources and they have the capability to hire people back in again to work a second and third shift nonstop so they can get the final shape done within the time slot that they promised it. But will they? Who knows? They should. They should let go of this idea of we don't work the weekends like they were talking about. That's why we're scheduling the raids on these days because we don't want to work on the weekends. And they need to go back to working the weekends. They need to go back to working nights. They need to have somebody there overnight. If something happens for other parts of the world, not everybody is Pacific time. You know what I mean? So to respect everybody's time worldwide, globally, you should have somebody there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because everybody's on a different day and a different time zone, and their dinner and their time that they can play is different than our dinner and our time, and they should have the ability to play within their time that's allotted for their time zone and their family, and not have to think, oh, I can't play during this time because the Bungie employees are asleep over there and the game is broken and nobody's awake to fix the game right now. So they need to go back to that. That'll help fix the game for sure, because then we'll have even more agility to have somebody always there and have teams that are always there, fully staffed, every single moment of every single day. Now, this is a long video as it is, and I could go on with even more stuff. But the last thing that I want to touch on when it comes to making these changes that are going to help save the game is variety. And I know they have a lot of variety when it comes to ornaments and things like that, but they really, really, really miss these great opportunities for these crossovers with other studios. And they need to do that more often. Like right now, they have this crossover with The Witcher, but they don't have anything that I understand yet, that I've seen yet, that is in game. Like, for example, a mission in which you team up with mysterious guardian that looks like Geralt to hunt down one of these Ahamkara echoes or something. And so it's like being in The Witcher with Geralt hunting a dragon. You know what I mean? Like that would be a cool, really cool one-off side mission thing. And it could even only be like a little 10, 15-minute mission. And yes, that's a lot technically to put into a game, but that's just something cool that stands out that's going to be memorable. It's like one of those things where like they always try to create these experiences that you had to be there moments. That's a you had to be there moment. And they could do the same thing with so many other shooters. They can do that with Valorant. They can bring in a PvP map from Valorant and they can code it for Destiny, and then they can do the same thing and give a Destiny PvP map to Valorant players. And it'd be cool watching Valorant streams, seeing them on like Twilight Gap or something, playing a Valorant map. You know what I mean? That would be so cool. CS:GO could be the same way. Rainbow Six, there's the Dota, PUBG, for example. You could bring in a PUBG section of the PUBG map that we could play a PvE adventure on, for example, and then we can do the vice versa. We can have PUBG incorporate something from Destiny into a PUBG map, and so like you're out there, and then the circle closes, and all of a sudden the circle closes on one specific area, and it's all Destiny themed. It's like the Cosmodrome, like you're fighting in the Cosmodrome, but it's PUBG. Like that would be wild. Apex Legends can be the same way. League of Legends can have a similar setup when it comes to bringing in like a League of Legends landscape, for example, to be part of a mission for Destiny, and then vice versa. There's a game out there called Hunt Showdown that I've talked about multiple times that to me has given the best PvP, PvPvE is experience as well, like, for Gambit people, right? And it's just very little time to kill. It makes your heart pound. The sound of that game is so spectacular that everything that you do is just so realistic, like it's super immersive, and you could bring cowboys from that game because it's a cowboy game into Destiny and have even more cowboy stuff than what we had with the dungeon. And then you can then take some of the Destiny themed stuff and have that in Hunt for a little while, or have some of the Hunt skins be skins that are tied to things that have happened in the Destiny campaign. Doesn't even necessarily have to be mechanics, but it's just something cool to go back and forth with between these games. And I just don't understand how Destiny has this department that's supposed to be reaching out to these content creators to hype up Marathon, but nobody sits down and thinks, "Hey, why don't we get these collaborations and do these things? Every season we can have a different collaboration that people can look forward to, and it's not that much more work because a lot of your work has been done already since it's already been developed in the other games. You just have to convert it, which is a little bit of work, but it's something that is going to save somebody creatively because now we have these collaborations to expect. And it's like, who's Destiny going to collaborate with next? You know what I mean? Kind of like how Fortnite had its thing where it's always somebody new, it's always some new collaboration. And Fortnite has lasted this long to the point where they've even had like a WoW moment and gone back to original Fortnite when World of Warcraft went back to WoW Classic. And so when you've had that longevity in a game, you've lasted long enough that you've been able to just reset again. I mean, come on, Destiny's had that kind of longevity, but they still struggle with this idea of being able to kind of break the fourth wall and have fun with the game and keep that going, because there's been plenty of moments like the 30th anniversary where they did something similar, and it was awesome. Like, I remember being in it. Now it's obviously faded a little bit because we've had some time since the 30th anniversary, but I will never forget that 30th anniversary event because it was fantastic. Getting all those weapons back, feeling like you were in Halo, and they can do that same thing now during this long season if, in fact, the final shape is going to be delayed, by creating a similar 30th anniversary style event, but with some type of a nice crossover with something that's similar to Destiny. And they've done it before. Obviously, they've had crossovers with Fall Guys, and I think they've had the Fortnite crossover as well. So it's not like this is the first time that they've had this idea, but they just need to work harder at it and make those relationships with those other studios to get it done, so that way we can have this cool stuff in the game. And even if they're only for short periods of times, those kind of you had to be there moments, that's what Destiny was looking for. That's what sometimes can make Destiny special, and that's going to expose people to Destiny from those other products. And if they can come over, and they can come over seamlessly, like we talked about in the very beginning of the video, with very little necessary when it comes to buying all of these expansions, they just buy this one slightly higher priced game after they did the free to play during the event, right? Then they come and they buy that slightly higher priced version, that legacy pack. They're caught right up. They get some of the weapons that are hard to obtain normally, and they boom, they hit the ground running, and they can do the raids, and they can do these things, and they can go in with their friends. And so I could go on and on. This video is getting around, 40 minutes, close to that time frame. I'm sure it'll be a little shorter with editing, but it's just insane to me how I can sit down as just an amateur and have this conversation with you guys just openly through a mic, no script necessarily. I just had kind of bullet points on what I wanted to talk about, and just riffing, have these particular feedbacks that would just completely transform the game for people. And it's only a few points. I think it's only like three major points that we talked about specifically. New leadership, these changes to the system, and crossovers, and more variety when it comes to these you had to be there moments. And there's so much more behind all of this. There's so many more other videos by other content creators of things that can change the game entirely for a positive and a rewarding experience, but the management just refuses to do it from greed. From just greed. That's like the key problem with Destiny right now. And so those greedy people, they got to go. Period. Like, I have no sympathy for them after what they pulled, after the way that they fired these people recently, or let them go recently, right before their benefits were going to be able to carry over. I mean, just scum of the earth stuff. And then they tried to come out, these same CEOs tried to come out and give themselves a congratulatory pat on the back for having lasted as long as they have. I mean, just ridiculous. So until I see that, until I see CEOs being replaced, until I see feedback coming through to Destiny, and then within months getting in the game, until I see that the game is actually starting to make it easier for new players to come on board so that they can experience Destiny after the final shape. They can experience whatever the new version of Destiny is going to be, and maybe grow another type of overarching story that's similar in scope and epic like the final shape. Because I mean, there's so many other things that are out there still. You know, we still have the Nine, we still have Maya Cinderesh that hasn't been resolved. There can still be some new type of entity that is above both the Traveler and the Witness, and we just haven't had a chance to experience them because they are too large and too vast for us even to have been messed with. But once we upset the balance and get rid of light or dark, one side or the other, then that other entity shows up to balance things. I mean, we don't have any of that in the game yet currently, as far as something that we're working towards actively. We have them in like background lore and stuff like that that you have to search for, but we still have to resolve all those things, and so all those new players can still experience all that cool stuff. If only Destiny rooted out the greed and the ridiculous corporate uh, behaviors, I guess is the best way to put it. Not necessarily corporate as a whole, but like Bungie corporate behaviors is kind of what I'm trying to get at. The Bungie corporate way of doing things that has put us into this position. And I just pray. I pray that somebody's going to see all of this feedback, and the shareholders are going to start to really feel the changes and start to move some CEOs, because until that happens, Destiny's going to continue the same route that it's going on. It's just going to be kind of like we would say putting lipstick on a pig, right? They're going to just try to make it look nice and flashy on the way down. You know what I mean? Like you could put a bunch of lights on a boat as it's sinking, and yeah, it's going to look really cool under the water, but then it's no longer a good useful boat, right? So hopefully that's not going to be the situation with Destiny. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this video either on a drive or kind of playing it in the background while you're working on your Thanksgiving, or even falling asleep to it through your food coma and waking back up and catching it later on. I know it's a long video. Thanks very much for all the subscribers recently. Since I've been gone for a couple weeks, I haven't had a chance to say thanks for everybody that subscribed and liked the video and commented and kind of contributed for all those things. And I'm going to still make probably one more video this week of my impressions of the Season of the Witch, if I get time, and also a little bit of a preview impressions of Season of the Wish, which is going to be a hell of a mouthful, right, between Witch and Wish, trying to separate the two. But I'm going to try to make that video as well. So thanks very much for watching to the end, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Happy Thanksgiving again. Later.